The coffee shop smelled of cinnamon and burnt espresso, a Tuesday afternoon refuge for those avoiding real life. Melissa Hart sat in the corner booth, deliberately slouching in an oversized gray sweatshirt that had seen better days, probably in 2015. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun that wasn't the fashionable kind, and she'd chosen her oldest pair of jeans, the ones with a small stain on the knee from a pasta incident she'd rather forget. No makeup. Definitely no makeup. She checked her phone for the third time in 5 minutes. Her best friend Tracy had set up this blind date, and Melissa had agreed only to stop the incessant nagging. After 3 years of failed relationships, and one spectacularly disastrous engagement to a man who'd emptied her savings account before disappearing, Melissa had developed a foolproof strategy. Look as unappealing as possible on first dates. If a man couldn't handle her at her worst, he didn't deserve her at her best. Or something like that. Mostly, she just wanted to get through the next hour without another disappointment. The door chimed, and Melissa glanced up expecting to see some average guy in khakis. Tracy's usual type she tried to push on her. Instead, a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit walked in, the kind of suit that whispered money rather than shouted it. He was tall, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples, and he moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. Melissa watched him scan the coffee shop, probably looking for some Instagram model he was supposed to meet. Their eyes met. He smiled and walked directly toward her table. "Melissa?" His voice was warm, with a slight rasp that suggested either too many late nights or too much good whiskey. "I'm Christopher Dane. Tracy said you'd be in the corner booth." Melissa's mouth went dry. This couldn't be right. Tracy had described her blind date as a nice guy from work who was recently single and could use a friend. This man looked like he'd stepped out of a Forbes magazine cover. She glanced down at her ratty sweatshirt and wanted to disappear into the cracked leather booth. "That's me," she managed, not standing up. "You can sit if you want, or not. I mean, if you need to leave, I totally understand." Christopher's smile widened, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. "Why would I leave? I just got here." He slid into the booth across from her, with an ease that made her even more nervous. "I have to say, Tracy didn't mention you had the most expressive eyes I've ever seen. They're remarkable." Melissa blinked. "Are you sure you have the right Melissa? Melissa Hart? Works at Patterson Elementary as a third-grade teacher? Patterson Elementary loves murder mystery podcasts, has a cat named Agatha Christie, and makes the best chocolate chip cookies in 3 counties, according to Tracy." Christopher leaned back, completely relaxed. "That's what I was told. The cookie thing intrigued me most, I have to admit." Despite herself, Melissa felt a small smile tugging at her lips. "Tracy talks too much." "Tracy is a talented project manager and an excellent judge of character," Christopher said. "She's worked for my company for 2 years, and I've learned to trust her instincts." "Your company?" Melissa's heart sank. Of course. He was Tracy's boss. This was some kind of pity date, probably arranged because Tracy had mentioned her pathetic post-breakup hermit lifestyle one too many times in the office. "I own a consulting firm downtown. Very boring stuff. Corporate restructuring, efficiency analysis, that sort of thing." He waved his hand dismissively. "I'd much rather hear about third graders. I imagine they're far more entertaining than middle-aged executives worrying about profit margins." A barista appeared at their table, and Christopher ordered a black coffee and asked Melissa what she wanted. She asked for a chai latte, then immediately regretted it. It sounded so pretentious. Why hadn't she just said regular coffee? "So," Christopher said once the barista left, "I have a confession to make." Here it comes, Melissa thought. The polite exit. The "you seem nice but" speech. "I told Tracy not to describe me to you. I asked her to keep it vague." He ran a hand through his hair, looking almost sheepish. "I've had some experiences with women who were more interested in my bank account than in me. It gets exhausting, pretending you don't notice when someone's eyes light up at the mention of your job title, rather than something you've actually said." Melissa studied him carefully. There was something genuine in his expression, a weariness around his eyes that she recognized. She'd seen it in her own mirror after Jeremy left, that bone-deep tiredness that comes from being disappointed by people you'd trusted. Tracy didn't tell me anything except that you were single and could use a friend, Melissa said honestly. I almost canceled 3 times. I'm not really in a dating place right now. Or ever again, possibly. Bad breakup? Theft and abandonment combo special. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Sorry, I'm not usually this cynical or this underdressed. She gestured at her sweatshirt. Full disclosure, I dressed like this on purpose. I've been sabotaging my own dates for 6 months. Christopher laughed, a genuine sound that made a few other patrons glance over. That's brilliant. Wish I'd thought of it. I once wore a fake mustache to a set-up dinner. Didn't work. She complimented it. Melissa couldn't help but laugh. You did not. I absolutely did. It was a very dignified mustache. Made me look like a Victorian gentleman, or so I told myself. He accepted his coffee from the returning barista with a nod of thanks. The relationship lasted 3 weeks before she asked if I'd consider investing in her friend's cryptocurrency startup. That's when I knew the mustache had failed its mission. They talked for an hour, then 2. Christopher asked about her students, and Melissa found herself telling stories about 8-year-old drama and the politics of playground kickball. He listened like she was describing something fascinating, rather than mundane elementary school life. When she asked about his work, he described it with self-deprecating humor, making corporate consulting sound almost adventurous. I should probably go, Melissa finally said, noticing the coffee shop was preparing to close. I have lesson plans to finish. Can I see you again? Christopher asked, his directness catching her off guard. Maybe somewhere you feel comfortable dressing however you want. Though I have to say, that sweatshirt is growing on me. Melissa hesitated. Every instinct screamed to say no, to protect herself, to not risk another heartbreak. But something about Christopher felt different. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at her ratty clothes and messy hair and smiled like she was exactly what he'd hoped to find. Okay, she said quietly. But I choose the place, and I'm paying for myself. Deal, Christopher said, standing and offering his hand to help her up. She took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. As they walked toward the door, Melissa's phone buzzed. A text from Tracy. How's it going? Did you scare him off yet? Melissa glanced at Christopher, who was holding the door open for her, his expression hopeful and kind. She had no idea that the man she'd just agreed to see again was worth more than most small countries' GDP, or that his consulting firm was actually a global empire with offices on 4 continents. She didn't know that Christopher Dane's name appeared regularly in financial newspapers, or that his last relationship had ended when he'd discovered his girlfriend had sold their private conversations to a tabloid. All she knew was that for the first time in 3 years, she felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. What Melissa couldn't have known was that Christopher had made a decision the moment he'd seen her deliberately slouched in that oversized sweatshirt, making no effort to impress him. He'd found exactly what he'd been searching for. The following Saturday, Melissa stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, which was 19 minutes longer than she'd spent getting ready for any date in the past 6 months. She'd suggested meeting at the public library's used book sale, figuring it was casual enough to not feel like pressure, but meaningful enough to show she was making an effort. The question was, how much effort? Her cat, Agatha Christie, a plump tabby with attitude problems, sat on the bed watching her with judgmental green eyes. Don't look at me like that, Melissa muttered, pulling out a simple navy blue dress, then putting it back. I'm allowed to care a little bit. She finally settled on dark jeans without stains and a soft cream-colored sweater that Tracy had bought her last Christmas. Minimal makeup. Hair down and actually brushed. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone who looked like herself, just a more polished version. Christopher was already waiting outside the library when she arrived, and her breath caught slightly. He wore jeans and a dark green Henley shirt, casual but somehow still elegant. When he saw her, his face lit up in a way that made her stomach flip. You came, he said, as if there'd been doubt. I said I would. Melissa adjusted her purse strap nervously. Plus, I never miss this sale. Last year, I found a first edition Agatha Christie for $3. The cat's namesake? The very same. They spent 2 hours wandering through tables of books, their conversation flowing as easily as it had at the coffee shop. Christopher had an unexpected passion for history, particularly maritime disasters, which Melissa found endearingly morbid. She introduced him to her favorite mystery authors, and he actually seemed interested, not just politely nodding along. "My grandmother got me hooked on mysteries," Melissa explained, holding up a dog-eared copy of a classic whodunit. "She used to say that mystery novels taught you the most important life skill, paying attention to what people don't say." "Wise woman?" Christopher said. He paused at a table of old photographs and postcards. "My grandfather taught me something similar, but about business. He said the best deals happen when you listen more than you talk. Is that how you became successful?" The question slipped out before Melissa could stop it. "Tracy mentioned you do well." Christopher's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "Tracy has a generous definition of doing well. But yes, I've been fortunate." He picked up an old postcard showing the Portland harbor from the 1950s. "My grandfather started with a small accounting office. Very humble beginnings. He taught me that money is just a tool. What matters is what you build with it and who you become in the process." There was something in his tone, a careful neutrality that made Melissa wonder what he wasn't saying. But she didn't push. She had her own secrets, her own carefully guarded wounds. They left the library with a small stack of books each, and Christopher suggested lunch at a diner 2 blocks away. It was the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a menu that hadn't changed since 1987, and Melissa loved it immediately. Over burgers and milkshakes, Christopher asked about her ex-fiancé. The question gentle, but direct. "Jeremy," Melissa said, the name still leaving a bitter taste. "We were together 4 years, engaged for 6 months. I thought I knew him." She dragged a French fry through ketchup, not eating it. "Turns out he'd been unemployed for 8 months and didn't tell me. He took out credit cards in my name, emptied our joint savings account, and left a note saying he needed to find himself. Found himself in Costa Rica with his yoga instructor, apparently." "God, Melissa, I'm sorry. The worst part wasn't the money, though that hurt. It was realizing I'd been so blind. I teach 8-year-olds to recognize patterns and solve problems, but I couldn't see what was happening in my own life." She finally ate the French fry. "It made me question everything about my judgment." Christopher reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth. "You weren't blind. He was a skilled liar. There's a difference." "What about you?" Melissa asked, needing to shift the focus. "Tracy said you're recently single too." "Victoria," Christopher said, and something hardened in his expression. "We dated for a year. She was elegant, sophisticated, said all the right things. Then I discovered she'd been recording our private conversations and selling information to financial journalists. Nothing illegal, just intimate details about my life, my business decisions, my family. Things I'd shared in confidence." Melissa's chest tightened. "That's horrible." The tabloids had a field day. "Billionaire's girlfriend spills secrets." That was my favorite headline. He laughed without humor. "That was 8 months ago. I've been avoiding dating since then, until Tracy cornered me in my office and told me she had a friend who needed someone honest, and I needed to stop being a hermit." The word billionaire hung in the air between them. Melissa's mind went blank for a moment, then started racing. Billionaire. Not just successful, not just well off. Billionaire. "I can see you processing that," Christopher said quietly. "I should have told you sooner, but I was enjoying being just Christopher for a while. Not Christopher Dane of Dane Industries. Just me." "Dane Industries?" Melissa's voice came out higher than intended. "The Dane Industries? The one that's renovating half the waterfront? That owns the buildings downtown with your name on them? Technically, the buildings don't have my name on them. The company does." He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "This is why I don't lead with it. Everything changes. People start calculating net worth instead of listening to what I'm saying." Melissa sat back in the booth, her mind reeling. Tracy hadn't just set her up with her boss. She'd set her up with one of the wealthiest men on the West Coast. And Melissa had shown up to their first date in a stained sweatshirt. "I need a minute," she said, standing abruptly. "I'm not leaving. I just need to breathe." She walked to the diner's bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at herself in the mirror. This was insane. She was a 3rd-grade teacher who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and considered splurging when she bought name-brand cereal. He was a billionaire. Actual billionaire. The math didn't work. But then she remembered the way he'd listened to her stories about her students, genuinely interested. The way he'd laughed at himself, not taking anything too seriously. The vulnerability in his eyes when he'd talked about Victoria's betrayal. When she returned to the table, Christopher was staring at his untouched milkshake. "I'm not good at this," Melissa said, sliding back into the booth. "I don't know how to date someone who probably has a private jet." "3, actually," Christopher said, then winced. "Sorry. Bad joke. Melissa, I don't want you to think about any of that. I just want to spend time with someone who sees me, not my bank account. Can we try that? I'm terrible at pretending things don't exist. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to get to know me before deciding what the money means." His eyes were earnest, almost pleading. "I like you. I like that you dressed in your worst sweatshirt to try to scare me off. I like that you're honest and you don't play games. I like that you're sitting here telling me you're terrible at this instead of pretending it's not complicated." Melissa took a deep breath. "Okay, but I have conditions." "Name them." "We split everything. I'm not comfortable with you paying for things all the time. It feels like a power imbalance." She held up a hand when he started to protest. "I know it's not rational, but it's important to me." "Agreed. Though I reserve the right to occasionally bring you coffee. And we take this slow. I mean glacially slow. I need time to figure out if this is real or if I'm just dazzled by the impossible fairy tale of it all." "I can do slow," Christopher said. "Though for the record, I'm the one who feels like I'm in a fairy tale. Do you know how rare it is to meet someone genuine?" They finished their lunch, the tension easing back into comfortable conversation. As they walked back to their cars, Christopher's phone rang. He glanced at it and grimaced. "I have to take this. Business crisis. Can I call you later?" "Sure," Melissa said, and meant it. She watched him walk away, phone pressed to his ear, his entire demeanor shifting into something more authoritative. This was the billionaire CEO, she realized. The man who ran an empire, and somehow, impossibly, he wanted to date her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tracy. "Tell me everything." Melissa smiled and typed back, "You have so much explaining to do." What she didn't know was that the business crisis on Christopher's phone was his brother, demanding to know why Christopher was wasting time with some nobody teacher when there were appropriate women who understood his world, or that Christopher had told his brother to mind his own business in language colorful enough to make a sailor blush. The real test, Melissa would discover, wasn't whether she could handle Christopher's wealth. It was whether she could handle everyone else's reaction to it. 3 weeks into dating Christopher, Melissa's carefully constructed normal life began to crack at the seams. It started small. A photographer outside her apartment building, a gossip blog mentioning mystery woman seen with Christopher Dane, Tracy pulling her aside at school pickup with wide, worried eyes. "Have you seen what they're writing about you online?" Tracy asked, shoving her phone toward Melissa. The headline read, "Billionaire Christopher Dane's new flame, elementary school teacher or gold digger in disguise." Melissa's stomach turned as she scrolled through the article, which speculated about her motives, her background, even included a photo of her apartment building with the caption, "Modest living, for now." Someone had dug up her engagement announcement to Jeremy from 3 years ago, spinning it into a narrative about a woman with a pattern of targeting successful men. "This is insane," Melissa whispered. "They don't even know me." "Christopher needs to shut this down," Tracy said firmly. "He has publicists for this exact reason." But when Melissa called Christopher, he sounded exhausted. "I'm trying, Mel. I've had my team contact the major outlets, but these gossip sites, they don't care about truth. They care about clicks." He paused. "I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to protect you from." "Maybe we should cool things off," Melissa said, hating the words even as she spoke them. "Just until the attention dies down. Is that what you want?" Christopher's voice was careful, controlled. "Or is that what you think you should want?" Melissa sat on her classroom floor after hours, surrounded by construction paper and glitter from the day's art project. "I don't know anymore. A photographer followed me to the grocery store yesterday, Christopher. I teach children. I can't have this chaos in my life." "Then let me fix it. Come to dinner at my house tomorrow night. Meet my family. Let them see you're real, that we're real. Once they know you, the narrative changes. Every instinct screamed at Melissa to say no, to run back to her safe, predictable life of lesson plans and Friday night murder podcasts. But there was something in Christopher's voice, a vulnerability, a hope, that made her pause. "Okay," she said quietly. "But if your family hates me, I'm leaving and we're ordering pizza instead." Christopher's laugh was relieved. "Deal. Though I should warn you, my brother Marcus can be challenging, and my mother has very specific ideas about appropriate partners." "Oh, good," Melissa said dryly. "No pressure then." The next evening, Christopher picked her up in a car that cost more than she'd make in 5 years of teaching. The drive to his house, estate, really, took them into the hills overlooking the city, where properties hid behind gates and privacy hedges. "I should mention," Christopher said as they approached an imposing iron gate, "the house is a bit much. My grandfather built it in the 50s when he made his first million. Every generation has added to it. It's more museum than home at this point." A bit much turned out to be a massive understatement. The house sprawled across manicured grounds, all stone and glass and old money elegance. Melissa felt her courage wavering. "I can't do this," she said suddenly. "Christopher, look at this place. Look at me. I'm wearing a dress from Target." Christopher put the car in park at the circular driveway and turned to face her. "You know what I see when I look at you? Someone brave enough to show up authentically. Someone who didn't pretend to be anything but herself, even when it would have been easier." He took her hand. "My family has money, Melissa. That's all. It doesn't make them better or wiser or more deserving of happiness. If anything, it's made some of them worse." They were greeted at the door by a housekeeper who seemed unsurprised by Melissa's existence, which was oddly comforting. The interior was exactly as overwhelming as Melissa had feared. Soaring ceilings, artwork that probably belonged in museums, furniture that looked too expensive to actually sit on. Christopher's mother, Patricia Dane, waited in what was apparently called the sitting room, a space larger than Melissa's entire apartment. She was elegant in the way of women who'd never worried about money, her silver hair perfectly styled, her expression coolly assessing. "Mother, this is Melissa Hart." Christopher's hand stayed firmly on the small of Melissa's back. "Melissa, my mother, Patricia." "Mrs. Dane," Melissa said, offering her hand. "It's lovely to meet you." Patricia's handshake was brief, formal. "Christopher has told us very little about you. He's been quite secretive." Her tone suggested this was not a compliment. "Protective, not secretive," Christopher corrected. "Given what happened with Victoria, I think my caution was warranted." A man who could only be Christopher's brother appeared in the doorway. Marcus Dane was younger, sharper somehow, with the same dark hair but cold eyes that immediately sized Melissa up and found her wanting. "So you're the teacher," Marcus said, not bothering with a handshake. "Interesting choice, Chris. Very unexpected." "Marcus?" Christopher's voice carried a warning. Dinner was excruciating. They ate in a formal dining room at a table that could seat 20, though only the 4 of them were present. Patricia asked pointed questions about Melissa's family, her education, her prospects. Marcus made comments that walked the line between jokes and insults. Christopher grew increasingly tense beside her. "I'm curious," Marcus said over the main course, something French that Melissa couldn't pronounce. "What is it about my brother that attracted you? His charming personality? His love of maritime disasters?" The implication was clear. Melissa set down her fork carefully. She'd spent 3 weeks being polite, being quiet, trying not to make waves, but she was tired of being treated like a fortune hunter, when she'd been perfectly happy with her modest life before Christopher walked into it. "Actually," she said, her voice steady, "I didn't know who Christopher was when we met." "Your sister..." She looked at Patricia. "I mean, Tracy, your project manager, set us up. She described him as a nice guy from work who could use a friend. I showed up in my rattiest sweatshirt specifically to discourage any romantic interest because I've been avoiding dating since my ex-fiancé stole my savings and disappeared." The table went silent. "What attracted me to Christopher," Melissa continued, "was that he listened when I talked about my students like their problems actually mattered. He made me laugh. He was kind to the barista and didn't make me feel stupid for not knowing about wine or art or whatever else you all probably consider essential knowledge. She looked directly at Marcus, and honestly, I keep waiting for this to become less terrifying. But every day there's a new article calling me a gold digger, or a photographer outside my school, or someone like you implying I'm not good enough. So forgive me if I'm not performing gratitude for the privilege of being interrogated. Patricia's expression had shifted to something that might have been respect. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. Christopher was trying very hard not to smile. "Well," Patricia said after a long moment, "at least you have a spine. That's more than I can say for the last 3 women Christopher brought home." "Mother," Christopher said, but there was relief in his voice. "I like her," Patricia declared, as if that settled everything. She turned to Melissa. "You should know that Marcus is protective of his brother, sometimes to the point of rudeness. He means well, even if his execution is terrible." "I don't mean well," Marcus muttered. "I mean to protect family assets." "I don't want Christopher's money," Melissa said tiredly. "I don't want his houses or his cars or whatever else comes with this life. I just want him. But I'm starting to wonder if that's even possible when everyone around him sees me as a threat or a transaction." Christopher stood abruptly. "We're leaving." "Christopher," his mother started. "No. Melissa came here as a favor to me, to try to make this easier. Instead, she's been treated like an interloper in her own relationship." He helped Melissa out of her chair. "When you're ready to treat her with the respect she deserves, we'll try this again. Until then, we're done." They were in the car before Melissa could process what had happened. Christopher drove in silence for several minutes, his jaw tight. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "That was worse than I anticipated." "Your brother hates me. My brother is an ass who thinks net worth determines human value." Christopher pulled over at a scenic overlook, the city lights spreading below them. "Melissa, I need to tell you something." Her heart clenched. This was it. The moment he realized she was too much trouble, that his family was right, that they were from different worlds. "I'm falling in love with you," Christopher said quietly. "I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But sitting in that dining room, watching you stand up for yourself against my family, I realized I've never met anyone like you. You're not impressed by money or intimidated by it. You just see me." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "This is really hard, Christopher. I want to believe we can make this work. But you're scared," he finished. "I am too. Victoria's betrayal nearly destroyed me. I swore I'd never trust anyone again. Then you showed up in that ridiculous sweatshirt and suddenly I wanted to try. What if your family never accepts me?" Christopher took her hand, pressing it against his chest. "Then we build our own family, you, me, and Agatha Christie the cat. Maybe some kids who you can teach to appreciate murder mysteries and maritime disasters." Melissa laughed through her tears. "You're insane." "Probably. Is that a yes to trying? To seeing where this goes?" She thought about her careful, protected life. The walls she'd built after Jeremy. The safe predictability of teaching and Friday nights alone. Then she thought about Christopher's laugh. The way he remembered small details about her students. How he'd defended her to his own family without hesitation. "Yes," she said, "but I'm buying my own pizza from now on." What neither of them knew was that Marcus had followed them, parking at a distance, watching through expensive binoculars. Not out of concern for his brother, but because he'd hired a private investigator to dig into Melissa's past. And what that investigator had just discovered would either destroy their relationship or prove that Melissa Hart was exactly who she claimed to be. The private investigator's report arrived on Marcus's desk 3 days after the disastrous family dinner. He opened it expecting to find evidence of Melissa's calculated pursuit of his brother, maybe a pattern of dating wealthy men, or debts that would explain her interest in a billionaire. Instead, he found something that made him pick up the phone immediately. "Christopher, we need to talk," Marcus said when his brother answered. "It's about Melissa. If you're calling to insult her again, just listen." Marcus took a breath. "I had her investigated. Before you get angry, hear me out. The investigator found something you need to know." Christopher's voice went cold. "What did you do?" "Jeremy Walters," her ex-fiancé. He didn't just steal from her. He took out 3 credit cards in her name, a personal loan, and he forged her signature on documents that made her liable for his gambling debts. We're talking about over $200,000. She's been paying it off for 3 years, working summer school and tutoring on weekends. She hasn't taken a real vacation since he left. She buys secondhand clothes and lives in that tiny apartment because every spare dollar goes to fixing the financial destruction he caused. The line went silent. Christopher? You had no right to invade her privacy like that. But Christopher's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something that sounded like anguish. She never told me it was that bad. Because she has pride, Marcus said quietly. Because she's not with you for money. She's trying to survive despite not having any. Chris, I was wrong about her. Completely wrong. And I need to apologize. Christopher ended the call and immediately drove to Melissa's school. He found her in her classroom after hours as usual, grading papers while eating a peanut butter sandwich for dinner. You don't have to live like this, he said from the doorway. Melissa looked up, startled. Christopher, what are you doing here? Marcus told me about Jeremy, about the debt. He walked into the classroom, looking around at the cheerful decorations she'd clearly paid for herself. Melissa, why didn't you tell me? Her face flushed. Did your brother investigate me? Seriously? He did, and it was wrong. And he knows it, but that's not the point. $200,000, Melissa. You're drowning and you didn't say a word, because it's my problem, not yours. She stood defensive. I made the mistake of trusting Jeremy. I signed those papers without reading them carefully enough. I'm the one who has to fix it. You were a victim of fraud, and I reported it, and the police said there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute, and the credit companies said I was liable regardless. Melissa's voice cracked. So I've been fixing it, piece by piece. I don't need rescue, Christopher. I don't need you to swoop in with your checkbook and make my problems disappear. What if I want to help? Then you're not listening to me. She grabbed her bag, papers scattering. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You finding out I have problems and deciding you need to fix them because you can afford to. That's not a relationship. That's charity. That's not what I meant, isn't it? Melissa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You come from a world where money solves everything. But some of us need to solve our own problems to prove we can survive. I've spent 3 years rebuilding my credit, my savings, my sense of self-worth. I won't let you take that away from me by writing a check. Christopher stood in the middle of the classroom, surrounded by 8-year-olds' artwork about gratitude, and realized he was about to lose the best thing that had ever happened to him. You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to fix you. I was trying to ease a burden that never should have been yours. But I hear you. Your independence matters. Your ability to handle your own life matters. Melissa wiped her eyes. I need some space. To think. How much space? I don't know. Everything is moving so fast, and your brother is investigating me, and I feel like I'm losing control of my own story. Christopher nodded, even though it hurt. Okay. But Melissa, when you're ready to talk, I'll be here. No pressure, no expectations, just me. A week passed, then 2. Christopher threw himself into work, but every morning he looked at his phone hoping for a message. Marcus, surprising everyone, showed up at Melissa's apartment with flowers and a genuine apology that she accepted with wary grace. Patricia called her directly, inviting her to lunch, as 2 women who care about the same stubborn man. It was Tracy who finally intervened, cornering Melissa at school. You're miserable, Tracy said bluntly. He's miserable. What are you waiting for? Proof that this can actually work, Melissa admitted, that I'm not going to wake up one day and realize I've lost myself trying to fit into his world. You stood up to his entire family at dinner. You told off a billionaire for trying to help you. You're the least lost person I know. Tracy squeezed her hand. The question isn't whether you can fit into his world. It's whether he's worth building a new world together. That night, Melissa drove to Christopher's house, the one she'd fled from weeks earlier. She rang the doorbell, half expecting a housekeeper, and nearly laughed when Christopher himself answered in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, looking exhausted. Melissa, "I've been thinking," she said, "about us, about what it means to be together when we come from such different places." Christopher's face was carefully neutral. And I realized I've been so focused on not losing myself that I forgot something important. You never asked me to change. You loved me in a ratty sweatshirt. You defended me to your family. You respected my boundaries even when it hurt. She took a breath. "I was so busy protecting myself from being hurt again that I didn't see you were doing the same thing. I would never—" "I know." "That's what I finally figured out." Melissa stepped closer. "I don't need you to save me from my debts or my problems, but maybe I could use a partner, someone who stands beside me while I save myself." Christopher's expression cracked into something raw and hopeful. "I can do that. I want to do that. And I need you to understand that I'm going to keep teaching. I'm going to keep living modestly because that's who I am. Your money doesn't change my values." "I wouldn't want it to." "One more thing," Melissa said. "No more investigations. No more trying to manage narratives or control how people see us. We just live our lives and let everyone else figure it out." Christopher pulled her into his arms, and Melissa felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe, not because Christopher could buy her security, but because he saw her struggles and loved her anyway. 6 months later, they were engaged. Not with a massive public announcement or society party, but with a quiet proposal in Melissa's classroom after school, Christopher on one knee between tiny chairs, offering a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious. "Before you answer," he said, "I need you to know something. I've established a foundation in your name. It helps teachers pay off fraudulent debts and provides legal assistance to fraud victims. You'll run it if you want. No salary. Just the satisfaction of helping people who went through what you did." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to. I didn't do it to fix your problem. I did it because you showed me that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to make the world better. You taught me that." He smiled. "So what do you say? Want to marry a reformed billionaire who's learning that the best things in life can't be bought?" "Yes," Melissa said, pulling him up to kiss him. "But I'm keeping my apartment for a while. Just so I remember where I came from." "Deal." Christopher laughed. "Though Agatha Christie is moving in with me immediately. She's already claimed the master bedroom." They married 8 months later in a small ceremony that Melissa's students helped decorate with handmade flowers and enthusiastic if somewhat messy artwork. Marcus gave a surprisingly heartfelt speech about being wrong and learning humility. Patricia cried and admitted she judged too quickly. Tracy took credit for the whole thing and made everyone promise to name their first child after her. Melissa never stopped teaching. Christopher never stopped being wealthy. But together they built something neither could have created alone, a partnership based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the revolutionary idea that love doesn't require you to change who you are. And on Friday nights, they still ordered pizza and listened to murder mystery podcasts. Melissa in comfortable clothes, Christopher beside her, both of them exactly where they belonged.